Hey, I'm Brad, and this is the B-Rad podcast. Thanks for being here. I've created this so that we can experience the awe, wonder, and curiosity of being human. For many years, I carried the sense that something was wrong with me. No matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't fit all the pieces together. My faith tradition promised acceptance from the divine, but I often felt this separation. He's over there, and I'm over here. So I decided to leave the path and the tradition. But what if leaving the path actually is the tradition? What if there's more going on here than what I was led to believe? Now, I know that separation is just an illusion. There's nothing wrong with me, and there's nothing wrong with you. We've simply forgotten who it is that we are. It's time for us to wake up to this divine reality, having eyes to see what has been true the whole time. It's from this heart space that I meet you here. I invite you to step off the familiar path, where together we can be radical in our becoming. Welcome.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the B-Rad podcast. I want to be the first one to tell you Happy New Year's, kind of. At the time of recording this, we are at the end of August. This is the last week. We're getting ready for school. Kids are going back. If you live in the US, perhaps your kids are already in school. So you're already like, yeah, the kids are back at school. And this is an interesting time of year. And I don't know who I was talking to, and we were just chatting. We're like, yeah, it feels kind of like New Year's again, right? You've got this turning of the season, and we've got maybe desires to change things in our lives. And because our kids are, if you have kids that are entering school, or maybe your kids are older and they're not, there's a change, in both the physical season of summer sort of into fall-ish, and you see that outside, but you also have this programs are starting again, and things are picking up where it was quiet, and now there's more activity again. So perhaps you feel that energy, which is great, and perhaps you're wanting to make some changes. You're wanting to approach this change of season as an opportunity to revamp some of your habits and maybe get rid of some things and change things up, and that's awesome. Making resolutions. And maybe you're not, and maybe this will kind of be of a primer for you to start thinking about that. So what I would like to do today is talk about this, and as we are thinking of recalibrating, perhaps recommitting ourselves, we are wanting to rediscover some things that we used to do that we don't do anymore. I want to give you some things to mull over. And these are some things that I've been thinking about, and maybe they'll be helpful to you as they have been to me. So the first one is take it to the curb. So whatever city you live in, whatever waste management processes you have set up, I'm assuming you've got a semblance of garbage and recycling and compost. Where we live in our town, we have each of those. Each bin has a different color. So garbage is gray, recycling is blue, and compost is green. And we sort through our stuff, every couple of days. And then once a week, you haul out to the curb these containers. And then the city comes by, picks them up, takes them away, and then they come back empty. And they come back to the house, and then the following week happens, and you just have this weekly cycle of garbage, recycling, and compost. And a month or so ago, I was looking at these things and I'm thinking, how can that translate to my life? Because there's something about these three bins that spoke to me. And this is the episode, I think, for me to share that with you. So we know what these are, but let's just quickly talk about them. So garbage, right? It's the discarding of what we no longer need. It run its course, and it gets thrown in there. In the perfect world, maybe everything could be recycled, but up until that point comes, there are some things that are just chucked and thrown in the garbage. And we need to in order to make room for new things, we throw things away. Recycling, it's the repurposing of something. And when I put things in my recycling bin, I don't necessarily see what happens on the other end, but I'm only assuming that once it ends up in the waste management facility that they sort through. So now this pile is the corrugated paper and cardboard, and then this pile is plastic containers, and this is glass, and this is other different things. And then they collect those things together, and whatever they do, maybe they use water, or I'm kind of speaking out of ignorance here. I don't know exactly all the processes, but they do something with it, and then it has the opportunity to be repackaged in some new form that you might find on the shelves of a store, or in some construction material, or whatever they end up using it for. So it has like another cycle to it, right? The word recycle, it started off as one thing, and perhaps it was new, and then all of a sudden it gets recycled. So it enters into a new cycle. So that's fantastic. I remember years ago, I think it was David Suzuki, I pronounce his name. He is a well-known advocate in Canada that speaks up for environmental concerns and political things. And I remember watching, I think it was The Nature of Things, and he was sorting out his garbage and recycling. And as a teenager, I thought, that's just such a waste of time. I would never do that. Why would I put things in one container and not in the other? Just chuck it all in the garbage. And yet now, man, I feel guilty if I don't recycle. I get this like moral radar go on inside of me. Hey, wait a second, that plastic doesn't belong there. It belongs over here. So thank you, David Suzuki, and others who have helped us realize, we can do better in our world. We can make use of something again and again and again. And recycling is just a great example of that. And then we have the compost bin. And some of you, maybe you don't actually have a bin of a compost. Maybe you actually put that somewhere in your yard. And like my parents have a thing where they put their organic material, and it's a big cylinder, and they turn it, and it turns into good soil that they can use for the garden or whatever the purpose they might have. And it's this organic waste that comes from food primarily, and then it gets broken down into organic material, and then it can be reused for something else. And the way that I look at it is compost is it lands somewhere in between garbage and recycling. So garbage is the things you throw away, recycling are the things that you throw back, and somehow compost lands in between. Garbage is discarding, and recycling is discovering. Garbage is releasing. Recycling is reusing. Garbage is abandoning. Recycling is awakening. And the way that I've written this out on my paper is I've got garbage on one column on the left, compost in the middle, and then recycling on the far right. And both of those columns on the left and right could sort of spill into the middle column, and compost somewhere lands in between there, right? You're throwing it away because it's no longer usable to you, but it doesn't completely die. Garbage doesn't just rot in the garbage dump, although you could say that garbage decomposes or is compost material. It just takes a whole heck of a long time for it to do that. So compost dies, but it's also recycled to some degree. It just takes longer, and we don't see the results of it right away. Okay, so that's kind of like a quick synopsis of garbage, recycling, and compost. So why does that mean anything? So I'm going to give you some examples of what I thought of. Maybe you can think of some too as I'm going through this as it relates to this New Year's #2 or New Year's-ish time of year that we're in. So garbage. What are some things that we can be putting in our physical, metaphysical garbage cans that can help us, towards some of the new habits that we're wanting to form? Well, maybe they're just simply articles of our life that need to be removed. Maybe it's getting rid of some clothes that you no longer wear. And maybe instead of garbage, you actually give them to Valley Village. So they're not garbage, but they're eventually leaving your house. Maybe you started reading a book, but you know what? It just wasn't really interesting. Well, then don't finish it, right? You just garbage the idea that you have to finish everything that you start. So that could be a book. It could be a project that you started doing. And you know what? You know that it doesn't matter to you. And you'd be better off just to let it die. Just throw it away and just leave it. Why do we feel this pressure to follow through on something when it really doesn't matter, right? We're not hurting ourselves. We're not hurting another person. You can just let it go. You don't have to finish it just because you started it. Maybe it's food choices that you need to just chuck. Sometimes if you're a nutritionist or a coach, I've heard of people doing this, and maybe my wife Donna has either done this, I think she has, where she might be helping someone, and so she'll go to their house and this person is asking for help, right? And so they're humbling themselves and saying, hey, can you help me with our family? So Donna has gone in and she looked in her cupboards and she has a garbage bin, and she literally just chucks garbage in the garbage bin because that stuff is shit. It's processed, it's full of sugar, it's just not good for them. So it just ends up in the garbage. That might be helpful to you. Maybe there are certain food choices that are just not good. And when you bring it into your house, you end up eating it. So we don't have to be food Nazis. I'm not saying never eat garbage food or things that are pleasurable or comfort food. But when you buy it and you drag it home and you put it in your shelves in your fridge, you up the chances of it actually being consumed, right? That's why you buy it. You're not buying it to throw it away, but you're buying it to eat it. But what if it just never makes it into your house, right? And if it is in your house, maybe you need to just clear it out a bit, right? Get rid of some of the stuff that just, is not helpful to you. Another thing, which kind of going back to the not finishing something because it's not necessary, sometimes we feel pressured to say yes, when really what we want to do is say no. Someone comes to us with an idea and we feel pressure to say yes because we care about them. Somehow maybe they're connected to our lives and we just don't want to let them down. And instead of maybe having time to think about it and really process whether we want to do it, we jump to the answer of yes, but really no would have been an appropriate answer too. So we can throw out the idea that we have to commit to every good idea that comes our way. An idea that comes from someone that we do want to support, someone we do care about, and yet we don't know how to say no. So that might be something that we can throw to the curb. Okay, so how about recycling? What are some ideas of what things in our life can be recycled? So these are a few that I jotted down. The first one was a journal that maybe you started using, but you stopped. And maybe you stopped because you forgot about it, you missed a couple of times, and then you convinced yourself that there was no reason to keep going because you stopped. So I can't keep going. This isn't working. Well, maybe you just need to pick it up again because maybe it was really helpful to you. It could have been a day planner. It could be just a blank journal. Something that you were using to maybe keep yourself more organized, more accountable. Just jump in where you left off, right? You don't have to start over again. Just pick up where you left off and recycle that idea of keeping yourself on track, tracking your progress, tracking your calendar, something that is useful to you, a tool that you saw value in, that you were getting value from, but for some reason it just got left behind. It could be that you need to recycle the idea of what exercise looks like in your life. And before you balk on this idea, if you don't like the word exercise, if it kind of has this nasty gym connotation, I get that. But maybe what if you just swap it with the word movement? I heard that a while back. I'm like, that's brilliant. I love that. So you can use the word, what's your exercise routine like? Or you go into this gym? Or what are you doing for exercise these days? If that doesn't quite sit well with you, just swap it with movement. See what that feels like. Because I know that our bodies are meant to be exercised, to be moved, to be put into motion. And if there is a program or some sort of routine that you have set up that's not working for you, don't throw exercise away. Don't just say, well, that doesn't work for me. I would encourage you to try a different angle. Recycle, repackage it into something else. It might mean going to a different gym. It might mean signing up for a different online program. It might mean doing at a different time of the day. Just tweaking slightly and seeing what does work for you. I did this for myself recently. I was going to a gym and I was just pushing myself too hard. I felt like it was actually damaging to me physically, and yet I was addicted to it because it made me feel good. And it's taken me a while to get to this awareness, but I just needed to shift. I needed to let go of it. So I almost had to like garbage the idea of going there. But then I realized I just need to recycle the idea. I need to do something that feels more intuitive for what I need right now. And for me, that's led into other forms of movement. I don't even want to tell you what I'm doing, not because I'm trying to keep it a secret, but I just don't want you to get hung up on one particular movement or exercise. But the point being is that it's important to me. And I'm not willing to not move in my life and to not have some routine that gets me moving my body, because I know that I'm going to benefit from that. So there you go. So there's my rant on movement and exercise. It could be a revisiting of some sort of structure in your business. Whether you are an entrepreneur or whether you work for someone else, maybe there were certain parts of your business that you had been doing, but it changed, but you need to come back to them. You have to revamp them, because the activity itself was good. It was helping you move towards the fulfillment of a project. It was beneficial for key partners involved and accomplishing a task and reaching profit and reaching goals. So don't dismiss the activity because somehow you're in a different season and say, well, we just have to do everything differently. That may not be the case. You just may need to come back to something with new eyes, with a new perspective. And to add on to that, what I would say is that sometimes when we've done something in the past and then we're looking at our life right now, it's very tempting to think that everything just has to be better and different. And if I want to kill it in this part of my life, and if I really want to see progress here, then I just have to adopt something totally different. And I think we might be missing something if we neglect the fact that there were past experiences that we did. And if we were to redo some of those past experiences, again, with a slight tweak or adjustment, if we do them now, chances are we might get a different result, the results that we're looking for, not because the activity has changed, but because we've changed. And because we've changed, the activity that we once did, that now we're doing again, all of a sudden can take us further, can have more impact, can be more meaningful, not because the activity has changed so much, but because we've changed. And that can be a way for us, again, to recycle, to repackage an idea into a new space and time, that we don't have to just plug in something new, but we just take something old and we can use it today. Another idea is perhaps you watched a movie that was great. Watch it again. And I don't know what your take is on this. Some people just, once they've watched a movie, they'll never watch it again because what's the point? I know what's going to happen. I know the ending. I know the plot line. But maybe that's not the point, right? You saw a film. It happened at a certain point in your life. For whatever reason, it just meant something to you. Give yourself permission to watch it again. Recycle the movie. Bring it out. Pay for it on iTunes or watch it on Netflix or wherever you watch media on. Because there's, and I'm biased in this, but I'm a sucker for coming back to the memory lane, not to be a permanent resident, not to get caught up in the good old days and just live 10 years ago because life was easier and my kids were easier to manage and things were less complicated. Like it's tempting to do that, right? But that's not healthy. But what I am suggesting is that when you approach past memories and when you use prompts like a movie that is visual, it's emotive, it's narrative, it's musical, it can give us an opportunity to access something that happened that maybe we need to remember, right? Something that was queuing us up to do what we were doing now. I mean, maybe we need to connect the dots and think, man, I remember watching that film and I had the idea to do something. And you know what? Here I am 5 years later. I've done the thing. Wow, that's amazing. I went from here to here, and this movie helps me just remember where I came from. I think that's probably one of the great values of recollecting a story from the past. And it's good to kind of come back to some of that ancient material, right? Sometimes we find that in scriptures, people will say, well, you need to read the old scriptures to know where we've come from. Maybe that's what they mean, right? But if you don't want to read scriptures, don't, right? If you want to watch a movie that meant something to you, do that, pull out some old pictures that capture a time in your life that if you were to see them again, it would do something to you. It would remind you of who you were and now who you are. It would remind you of who you were and who you've forgotten who you were. So in some ways we've evolved, we've transformed, and we have grown into something. And in other ways, maybe we've been stagnant and we haven't grown. And sometimes a picture or a story can just help remind us and get us back into that frame. So that's recycling. Now compost, this one is probably the hardest one to think of examples for, but here's a few stabs at it. It could be like the death of a dream that wasn't fulfilled. And so because your dream, maybe my dreams too, didn't come about, it got buried in this organic waste. And now it's just sloppy, and it's just darkness, and it smells bad, and I don't even know what to do with this. It's just, well, it's just gross. But that's the nature of compost, because compost is a very interesting thing, because something is done with. It could be this food is now done with. I'm not going to eat any more of this food. So now the food enters into this big pile with a bunch of other food, and it turns into just a sloopy mess, and doesn't seem to be useful for anything in that moment. But given enough time and the right conditions and circumstances, it can turn into fertile soil that can be used for your flowers, for potting your flowers, or it can be used for whatever else compost is used for. So there's a long-term projection for compost, but in the moment, it doesn't seem to be anything. And it just feels depressing. It feels like, well, that didn't work. That's a waste. I can't quickly recycle this into something else. I can't, within a period of a week or however it takes, recycling in my mind kind of has a quick turnaround. Whereas compost is more of a long-term commitment of, I don't know, I really felt this was going to work. I felt this relationship was healthy, and we both felt that. And now it's just messy. It's falling apart. What do I do? And I don't have the answers for that, because sometimes I feel like there's a lot of my life that feels like it's in the compost bin, and it's just sitting there, and it can feel painful, and it just feels complicated. But I have to believe that in nature we see this. Nature affirms for me this cycle, is that death and new life are one and the same. They're part of the same cycle. When something is dying, I know that that's not the end. I know that there is some form of resurrection that is taking place that's connected to that death. There's a pattern. And if we're willing to submit ourselves to that pattern, then we know that even in the messiness, even when the shit has royally hit the fan in your life and you just did not see that coming, it caused so much pain, and maybe you did it, maybe you caused the pain, or it was done to you. If we can trust that even in that dark place of rotting and decomposing, that there is something being birthed out of that, then we can just submit to that. And again, it's a long-term commitment, but when we practice, one way of practicing resurrection, practicing the belief that resurrection is true, we need to become well acquainted with death. We need to befriend it. We need to allow it to be in our midst. And when we do that, then the chances of us being reborn, we're open to it. and we don't fight it. Okay, so that's my take on taking it to the curb. So garbage, recycling, compost. I hope there was something of there that maybe tweaked your interest or caught your ear. Now I want to talk about, what are you bringing in through your front door of your house? So lots of things leave our house and they end up in these 3 bins. But then what happens when we bring stuff into our house? Come in with new groceries, we come in with new clothes, we come in with food for our dog, we come in with whatever we buy, it comes to our house or through Amazon, however it reaches there. So here's a few ideas, and I want to try to make this as practical as possible. So I've kind of broken it down into a couple of categories. So number 1, physically, what are you bringing in through your front door of yourself as a physical being? So what I mean by that is what food, okay? What food or drink enters your mouth? I am not of the position that there's some perfect diet out there. I don't think that exists. I think that there are some things that are fairly universal, such as good clean water, a higher degree of fruits and vegetables and things that are natural and whole. And I know there's lots of podcasts, I'm sure, out there that talk about nutrition and exercise, and you can find all that stuff. And maybe if you knew me personally, I might go deeper into this. But all this to say is that when you bring something into your body, it's affecting you. Okay, when you drink something, when you eat something, when you swallow something, when you put something on your skin, that's coming in your front door, and it's going to somehow affect you, positively, neutrally. One way or the other, it's coming into you. So be wise, have discretion, know how to make good choices. And maybe that's one area where you can take this New Year's approach of like, okay, I want to clean things up. This area, first of all, maybe start with the area that you're doing well. Congratulate yourself with, man, I'm drinking lots of water. I'm having salads more regularly. I am not overeating, I'm eating not too late at night. Different things that might you already do well. Fantastic. Make sure that you catch yourself winning in those areas. But if you need to make changes, and I would say we all probably need to tweak and modify our food choices as we go along, then do so. Make small choices. Don't feel like you have to bite it all at the same time. Pun intended. Okay, how about the next one is like the quality of your breath with your physical being. What does that look like coming in through your front door? Are you taking the time to breathe in your life? And it's funny because there are many modalities and that teach us how to breathe. And the reason it's funny is because breath is such a natural thing that we do, and yet we don't do it all that well. A lot of our breath is shallow. It's not deep and long. It's not, it's constricted. It's not expansive. So maybe look at that, look at different ways that you could be more intentional with your breath. And that might be connected to a modality such as yoga or breathing workshops like the Wim Hof method or 4 square breathing. I think that's another one. Right, that have information that people can guide you through how to breathe and to find a relaxed posture in that. That is definitely connected to movement and to any exercise that you might do. And when you elevate your heart rate and you oxygenate your cells, your body loves that stuff. My body does, and I'm sure yours does too. And to whatever degree that looks like for you, you just can't go wrong, And I know that we have limitations. Some people can do more or less. And I'm not disqualifying, or I'm not trying to make blanket statements that we all need to do this thing or whatever. But enough to say that our bodies are meant to move and to exercise and to breathe. So let's work with it. Let's work with this beautiful vessel in which we live, because we can make choices that really amplify our life and make our life better, the quality of life better through those choices. And then the last one under the physical category is just sleeping. Do you value your sleep? What does your sleep pattern look like? Do you think you're getting enough? The environment that you're sleeping in, is it good for you? Or do you have perhaps good quality mattress or sleeping material and sheets and pillows? Maybe you need to relook at that. What time are you going to bed? When are you waking up? Maybe you need to put a diffuser in your room. I know that with essential oils, that can really help. Look at sleep, because if your sleep is off, then that totally screws you up big time. We know this. I'm sure you know this too. When you are deprived of sleep, and not just sleeping at night, but just rest itself, where you give yourself permission to unwind, to unplug, to sit down, for Pete's sake. Man, I'm guilty of this, so I can speak firsthand, but when we get into this rat race sort of, I don't know if that's the right word, but when we get into this workaholic mode, we can't even allow ourselves to sit, right, for more than half an hour. And just to sit, just to talk, just to sit in silence. That we need to value rest and to sleep because our bodies need it to function. Okay, the next thing that we bring in the front door is emotionally. What are we bringing in the front door through our emotions? And my first approach to this is the emotions of other people. That's their emotions. Okay, so for me, I have an emotional IQ. I have an emotional basket. I have emotions, period. I'm trying to be poetic here, but I have emotions. And it would be very unwise for me to say, Donna, my wife or my kids, I want you to own some of my emotions, because if you really love me, you need to own this too. I can't carry this on my own. I would be a terrible person if I thought that way. Especially as an adult, I'm responsible for my emotions. I am responsible to someone in relationship. Yes, if I've committed, I've made arrangements, if they're relying upon me for something, then yes, I'm responsible to them based on our relationship and our respect for each other. But I'm not responsible for them. And particularly, I'm not responsible for their emotions. And neither is anyone responsible for my emotions. I think that the phrase growing up is so much connected to the responsibility that we take upon ourselves for what happens in our life, and particularly emotional responsibility, emotional intelligence. When we start to own that stuff, then we start to grow up, we start to mature. And if we find that we are playing the victim role and we project and we say, well, I feel this way because they triggered me. If they would stop talking like that, then I wouldn't feel this way. Or if it wasn't rainy today, I wouldn't feel this way. Why do we feel like we have to blame the outside world and make them responsible for our own emotions? I really think it's time that we take responsibility for our own emotional selves. And when we do that, we grow up, we mature, we start to become a responsible human being that can take care of ourselves. And when we become that way, then we can better take care of other people. Not necessarily to take care of their emotions, but maybe to help them with their emotions. Because, and I love my wife for this, the way that she models to me how we as parents teach our kids to become adults. And I remember even when they were really young, that there was like a philosophy, and we talked about this less, but it was actually modeled to me more, was that even when our kids are super young, they're not young forever. And if we were to just baby them, and man, I'm guilty for this, so my hands up in the air, I kind of enable and I'll come to their aid, and that's not good, but they are eventually going to become adults, right? That's the trajectory that they're on. So if I'm going to help them, then my job is to give them the tools, encourage them with the mindset so they can be self-sufficient, that they can take care of themselves. I know some people don't fall into this category. I can think of one friend of mine whose child is not emotionally capable, and I know there are circumstances, there are exceptions to the rules. So if you land in that category, if you're thinking about that, then yeah, for sure there are exceptions. But if you are, I don't want to say the word normal here, but if things are functioning properly and you have the capacity within you, then take it upon yourself to own your emotions. And if you're a parent, help your kids, help them take care of their emotional IQ as well. The third category, and the last one of this bringing in the front door, is spiritually. What are you bringing in through your front door to nurture the beautiful spirit that resides inside of you? I would say that the things that you plan for are the things that get taken care of. If you prioritize your spiritual self, then your spiritual self will grow. If you carve out time, if you gather resources, you do the work, you get up at a certain time to do it, or you get yourself to a facility where they teach something, then you put yourself in a position to grow. Now, it's not guaranteed that you'll grow, but you're giving yourself an opportunity to grow by prioritizing that. Now, there are times where life will hit you upside the head, and it might come in one or two ways. It might be an overwhelming sense of love and the universe, and God just hits you upside the head, and you're brought to your knees with adoration and love. Maybe you fell in love with someone. Maybe you just are awe-inspired by the beauty around you, and you did not plan for it. It's not in your schedule, and you're melting in a basket of love. So that happens. So sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes you're struck with tragedy. Sometimes the universe smacks you upside the head, but this time it knocks you to your knees with trauma and grief and indescribable pain that you didn't see coming. And maybe in retrospect, maybe you can see the signs and you start to sort through it all, and you maybe talk to counselors and you get help, and all that's okay. It's part of our life. So there are moments where spiritual experiences happen that aren't planned for. So fine, those happen. But what I am suggesting is that we can cultivate ways to bring in our front door spiritual opportunities and places that allow spirit to work through us. The body is like a battery, and the spirit is like a superconductor. So if you think of your phone, let's just stick with the analogy of a phone. So your phone has a battery, and when that battery starts to die, you might get a message saying switching into low battery mode, and it'll start to shut down certain functions so as to conserve the battery of your phone. And then at a certain point, if you keep going and you don't plug it in, it'll just hit zero, and your phone now is not functional. So you can hold your phone in your hand, and you can have a well-meaning intention to use it, but it's actually not going to work for you because the battery's dead. So in order for the phone to work again, this is obvious, right? We plug it in and you wait for it to charge, and then all of a sudden the battery's charged up again. So our body is like this phone inside, the battery inside of our phone. It has a certain amount of charge, and over time, over the course of a day, the charge gets depleted through the energy that we put out. And then at some point, we've got to plug it back in. Now, the spirit, to my understanding, if I just play with this analogy, is more like a superconductor. And a superconductor is this transferring of energy from one thing to another, and it's like an electrical charge, and it's movement, right? And it's got this like wave pattern to it. It doesn't seem to function with the same rules as a battery, right? It acts differently. It's got some dynamic flow to it. And the problem I think that happened is that if we switch the two and we think that our spirit is like a battery and our body, more importantly, that our body is like a superconductor, we end up with some dysfunctional problems in our life. Because our body is meant, we have to recharge it. Yes, the spirit lives in me, but my body, it can't just go indefinitely without rest. I can't just be on all the time. I have to have moments where it's being charged up again. And in fact, I think that spirit can work through us, perhaps even more efficiently or more interestingly, if we're taking care of our body. Taking care of the physical self, the emotional self, the joints, our blood, our lungs, the organs that we have. When our body is working properly and we are charging our batteries, then spirit can flow. It has the ability to make use of us because we are now available. Our batteries are charged. We're functioning. We're high functioning human beings, and we are able to have spirit then flow in and through us and be the superconductor that's carrying electrical current that wants to send messages and information and transferring of light and epiphanies and fulfillment and love and acceptance and all the things that spirit does to us and through us and as us. It does it when the battery of our bodies is functioning and when we're taking care of it. Now, to end this episode, I want to circle back just to this idea of the school year. So if you have kids that are going back to school, perhaps you are going back to school, and sometimes the school will have a tuition. And if it's a private school, then that tuition is greater. If it's public school, it's a bit less. If you're maybe going back to school as an adult and you're taking courses, you've got to pay something, right? There's a tuition fee, there's curriculum that you're paying for. You want the degree or the paper or whatever that's going to help you. You need to pay the price of the tuition. So in your life, if you are at this place of transition, you are celebrating a new year, the second new year of the year, I would encourage you to grab this mantra of pay full tuition. Pay the full amount of the course that you're taking. If you want all the benefits of whatever decision you're making that is going to be beneficial to you emotionally, financially to yourself, changing of something in your home, in your physical body, whatever those changes are, don't cheap out and don't try to get the discount. Don't look for the sale on what you're paying for. Be willing to just walk into it, pay the full amount down, and say, here it is. I want to pay full price on this. Sometimes sales are great. You know, my daughter would come home and she'll bring home a pair of shoes that she bought from the Valley Village or whatever, and she's so excited. You know, it's like, Dad, I got these for like $5, and aren't they amazing? And I'm like, yeah, they're amazing. They have a great quality, and the name brand is good. And so there's a time and place. You know, I'm not against sales, but what I am saying is that if we try to cheat ourselves on the value that we can get, then we are also going to cheat ourselves on the results that we can expect. So another way of saying that is if we cut corners and we just try to find the easy way and we try to find ways we can circumvent the system, then we're also going to cut the potential results that await us if we put in our full tuition fees. There is a principle at work that for you to get the value of something that is valuable, you got to pay full value for it. And if you know that going into it, then you have the right mindset around it. And you know full well that in order for you to have the result, to see the progress that you want to see, and progress is great. I think it's healthy for us to want to see progress and to make changes in order to have that progress. But just go in paying full tuition. And when you do that, I think you're going to enjoy your year at school. Thank you so much for being here and checking out this episode. I appreciate you being here. And if you have any comments or questions about this, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Also, if you got value from this and there was something that landed with you and you think that this could be helpful to one or two other people that you know, please pass it along to them. And you can do so through whatever channel that you are listening to this podcast on. One of the things that I'm changing in my life is I have a desire to write. I've had this for a long time. So one of the changes that I'm making is to write more. And I am intending on releasing some sort of book or ebook or whatever it is. So just to publicly announce and to put myself accountable to you, that's one of the changes that I'm making in my life. So I'm excited to share that with you in the coming months or whenever that's going to happen. The music today was brought to you from myself again. Hope that you're enjoying that. And as always, be radical in your becoming. I hope to see you next time. Thanks. Bye.